the spring of 88 BCE, the city of Ephesus, Roman merchants counted their coins, Italian tax collectors tally their ledgers, children play in marble courtyards. The sun sets on another ordinary day, but that night everything changed. Families fled into temples, clutching their children, whispering desperate prayers. In the great temple of Artemis, mothers begged the goddess to protect them. In Pergamon, fathers pressed their children against statues of the gods, believing divinity would shield them. Then the signal came. Torches blazed, doors were broken open. Mobs dragged Romans from sanctuaries, cutting them down on the steps of Artemis and Asclepius. Mothers drowned in the sea as their children were ripped from their arms. In Tralles, hired killers severed the hands of victims as they clung to holy statues before finishing them off. By dawn, between 80,000 and 150,000 Romans and Italians were dead, not by chance, not by chaos, but a meticulously planned massacre. The Asiatic Vespers, the night when a single king ordered the most coordinated slaughter in ancient history. That king was Mithridates VI of Pontus, the man who dared to humiliate Rome, the man who ordered 80,000 Romans killed in a single night. If stories like this fascinate you, make sure to like this video. It helps us bring you more of history's darkest moments. And don't forget to subscribe. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began, the man himself. Mithridates VI Eupator was born around 135 BCE in the kingdom of Pontus, along the southern shores of the Black Sea. But his childhood reads like something from a Greek tragedy. When he was just 11 years old, his father, King Mithridates V, was murdered, poisoned at his own banquet table. The young prince found himself in a deadly game of thrones. His mother, Queen Laodice, seized power as regent soon after his death, but she had a problem. She preferred Mithridates' younger, more pliable brother for the succession. The boy king was marked for death, but Mithridates was no ordinary child. Sensing the danger, he did something extraordinary. He disappeared. For years, he lived in the wilderness, among the mountains and forests of his kingdom. Some say he learned the languages of wild tribes. Others claim he began his lifelong obsession with poisons during this time, taking small doses to build immunity against future assassination attempts. When he finally returned, around 116 BCE, he was no longer the frightened boy who had fled. He was a man, tall, powerful, and utterly ruthless. In one swift move, he overthrew his mother and brother. Some sources say they died in prison. Others whisper they were executed. Either way, Mithridates was now the undisputed king of Pontus, and he had learned a valuable lesson: trust no one, show no mercy. Strike first or be struck down, but wait until you hear what kind of man this grandfather was shaping. Mithridates wasn't content with just ruling Pontus. He had grander visions that would put him on a collision course with Rome. First, he conquered the Greek cities around the Black Sea, presenting himself as their protector against barbarian tribes. The Greeks welcomed him as a savior. Then he expanded into Colchis, the legendary land of the Golden Fleece. His empire grew, stretching from the Caucasus Mountains to the shores of Crimea. But it was his claim to royal blood that truly set him apart. Mithridates declared himself descended from both Darius the Great of Persia and Alexander the Great of Macedonia. Whether true or not, this gave him something no other king of his time possessed: legitimacy in the eyes of both East and West. To the Persians and other Eastern peoples, he was the heir of Darius, come to restore their ancient glory. To the Greeks, he was a new Alexander, destined to liberate them from foreign oppression. And that foreign oppression, that was Rome. You see, by the late 2nd century BCE, Rome had transformed from protector to predator in the Eastern Mediterranean. Roman governors extracted crushing taxes. Roman businessmen enslaved debtors. Roman officials grew rich while local populations suffered. The resentment was building. All it needed was a spark, and Mithridates was about to provide that spark in the most horrific way imaginable. In 89 BCE, the First Mithridatic War began. Roman forces, led by the governor Manius Aquilius, had invaded Pontus, but they underestimated their enemy. Mithridates didn't just defeat them, he crushed them. Roman armies fled in panic. Aquilius himself was captured and, in a scene of poetic justice that would become legendary, Mithridates had molten gold poured down his throat. But military victory wasn't enough for Mithridates. He wanted something more permanent, something that would make it impossible for the cities of Asia Minor to ever reconcile with Rome. He wanted blood, Roman blood, and lots of it. Before I reveal what was actually happening inside those castle walls, let me ask you something. What would drive a king to order the systematic murder of an entire population? What kind of hatred burns so deep that it demands not just victory, but annihilation? The answer lies in what happened next. In the spring of 88 BCE, secret messengers began moving through the cities of Asia Minor. They carried sealed orders from King Mithridates. The message was simple, but its implications were staggering. On a designated day, at a designated time, every Roman and Italian citizen in Asia Minor was to be killed, not captured, not enslaved, killed. Men, women, children, it didn't matter if they spoke Latin, if they carried Roman citizenship, if they had Italian blood, they were to die. But here's what makes this truly chilling: the level of coordination required. We're talking about a conspiracy spanning hundreds of miles, involving thousands of people across dozens of cities, and somehow Mithridates achieved complete secrecy. Think about that for a second. In an age without modern communication, he managed to coordinate a simultaneous massacre across an entire region. The logistics alone are staggering, but the psychology? That's what's truly terrifying. How do you convince ordinary people, shopkeepers, farmers, craftsmen, to become mass murderers overnight? The answer reveals the true genius of Mithridates' evil plan. He didn't just order a massacre, he created the conditions that made it inevitable. First, he promised freedom to any slave who killed their Roman master. Imagine the thousands of enslaved people across Asia Minor suddenly offered not just liberty, but revenge against their oppressors. Second, he offered debt forgiveness to anyone who murdered their Roman creditors. In a region crushed by Roman taxation and usury, this was like offering salvation itself. Third, and most cunningly, he framed it as divine justice. Through carefully planted oracles and prophecies, he convinced people that the gods themselves demanded this cleansing, that Rome was a plague upon the earth, and they were the cure. But the masterstroke? He made participation mandatory. Any city that refused would face his wrath. Any individual who hesitated would be marked as a Roman collaborator. He didn't just give people permission to kill, he made it their patriotic and religious duty. And then came the night that would stain history forever. The date was set, the signal was given, and across Asia Minor the unthinkable began. In Ephesus, Roman refugees fled to the great temple of Artemis, one of the 7 wonders of the world. Surely, they thought, the sacred sanctuary would protect them. They were wrong. The mob dragged them from the altar itself and butchered them on the temple steps. In Pergamon, the Romans sought shelter in the temple of Asclepius, the god of healing. But there would be no healing that night. They were shot down with arrows as they clung to the statues of the gods. In Adramyttium, the Romans tried to escape by sea. The locals pursued them into the waves, drowning children before their mothers' eyes, then killing the mothers themselves. In Cornus, they gathered around a statue of Vesta in the Senate House. But not even the goddess of the hearth could save them. They were torn from the shrine and slaughtered like animals. But perhaps the most chilling detail of all comes from the city of Tralles. The citizens there, not wanting to dirty their own hands, hired a monster named Theophilus of Paphlagonia to do their killing for them. He led the Romans to the Temple of Concord, the Temple of Harmony and Peace, and there, in that sacred space, he chopped off their hands as they embraced the holy images before finishing them off. By dawn, it was over. In a single night, between 80,000 and 150,000 Romans and Italians had been murdered, entire families wiped out, generations erased. The streets of Asia Minor's greatest cities ran red with blood. But the true horror wasn't just in the numbers. It was in what this revealed about human nature itself. You see, this wasn't just a massacre. It was a revelation. For decades, Romans had lived alongside Greeks, Anatolians, and other peoples in these cities. They had been neighbors, business partners, even friends. Roman children played with local children. Roman families attended local festivals. And yet, when the signal came, all of that meant nothing. The Asiatic Vespers showed how quickly civilization can collapse, how easily ordinary people can become killers when given the right motivation, the right justification, the right leader. Mithridates understood something that many rulers miss. People don't just follow strength. They follow someone who gives them permission to act on their darkest impulses. He didn't create the hatred of Rome that existed in Asia Minor. He simply weaponized it. But every action has consequences, and the consequences of this night would reshape the ancient world. When news of the massacre reached Rome, the reaction was swift and terrible. This wasn't just an attack on Roman citizens, it was an attack on the very idea of Roman civilization. The Senate declared war immediately. They sent their greatest general, Lucius Cornelius Sulla, with 5 legions to crush Mithridates once and for all. But here's the thing about Mithridates: he was as brilliant a general as he was a ruthless politician. The war that followed would last for decades, spanning 3 separate conflicts. Mithridates would win stunning victories, suffer crushing defeats, and rise again like a phoenix from the ashes. He would ally with pirates and rebels. He would marry his daughter to the king of Armenia, creating a vast anti-Roman coalition. He would even make himself immune to poison, a skill that would prove both his salvation and his doom. For 40 years, this one man would be Rome's greatest nightmare. The king who dared to challenge the empire at its height. The monarch who turned the eastern Mediterranean into a battlefield. But it all began with that one night of blood. That moment when Mithridates proved that even Rome could bleed. In the end, of course, Rome won. They always did. Mithridates was finally defeated by Pompey the Great in 63 BCE. Cornered and facing capture, he tried to poison himself, but his lifelong immunity to toxins meant the poison had no effect. He had to beg a loyal soldier to run him through with a sword. The irony was perfect. The man who had spent his life protecting himself from poison died by the blade instead. But his legacy lived on. The Asiatic Vespers became a cautionary tale, whispered in the corridors of power for generations. It showed what happened when an empire pushed too hard, took too much, ignored the warning signs for too long. Most importantly, it demonstrated something that rulers throughout history have learned the hard way. You can conquer a people, but you cannot conquer their hatred. The story of Mithridates VI and the Asiatic Vespers reminds us that history is not just about dates and battles and political treaties. It's about human nature in all its complexity, the capacity for both great evil and great courage, often existing side by side in the same person. Mithridates was a monster who ordered mass murder, but he was also a brilliant strategist, a devoted father, a patron of the arts, and a man who genuinely believed he was fighting for freedom against tyranny. History rarely gives us pure heroes or pure villains. Instead, it gives us human beings, complex, contradictory, capable of both greatness and horror.